Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of What's the Word? Today is Friday, July 10th, 2020, and the word comes from 2 Peter 3:9, which reads, "The Lord does not delay and is not slow about his promise, but is extraordinarily patient toward you, not wishing for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance." And off that, I just want to say, trust his timing. Starting off today's episode in the District of Champions, the Washington Nationals had two of its players test positive for the coronavirus, with their best player Juan Soto reportedly coming in contact with one of the individuals and being placed into isolation. This comes after the Nats had their third player opt out, catcher Wellington Castillo. He was expected to be the team's backup catcher, one of their backup catchers, on the expanded roster. Speaking of roster moves, the Nationals added their 2020 first-round pick, pitcher Cade Cavalli, to their 60-man player pool. The Nats, of course, will have to narrow their roster down to 30 before opening day. Ramping up to that opening, the Nats had to cancel one of their workouts on Monday, citing the MLB's delay in providing personal protective equipment as well as response to testing. Speaking of the league, however, they did announce their 60-game schedule for all teams. And just as we expected, the World Series champion Washington Nationals will open the defense of their title against the New York Yankees Thursday, July 23rd at 7 p.m. on ESPN. They will share that national opening day spotlight with the Dodgers, who play host to the San Francisco Giants at 10 p.m. For the Nationals, their 60-game schedule this season consists of 40 games against the NL East, their division rivals, as well as 20 games against the American League East. That means this season the Nationals will play the Philadelphia Phillies, Atlanta Braves, Miami Marlins, and New York Mets as always. And their interleague schedule will consist of the Yankees, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Boston Red Sox, and their Beltway Series rivals, the Baltimore Orioles. Speaking of the Orioles, they'll open their season on the road against the Boston Red Sox on the 24th, with that game taking place at 7:30. As far as the O's chances, they're already one of the worst teams in the majors, and they'll be without their best player, outfielder Trey Mancini, as he battles colon cancer. For those of you who don't know, colon cancer is personal to me. My maternal grandfather lost his life in a battle with the disease. The team is selling shirts depicting fight with the number 16. Of course, paying tribute to Trey Mancini with the proceeds, going towards the Colon Cancer Alliance. So if you feel it in your heart to buy one of those shirts and contribute to the funds, go ahead and do that. But moving on to basketball, the Washington Wizards had guard Bradley Beal announce his decision to opt out of the NBA restart, saying, quote, "This was a difficult decision and one that I did not take lightly as the leader of this team. I wanted to help my teammates compete for a playoff spot in Orlando, but also understand that this will be the best for all of us in the long term." I can't do anything but respect Brad's decision. As you mentioned, the leader of this team, so we'll miss his presence. But Brad has two young children. He's top 5 in the league in minutes played, top in the league in points scored after the All-Star break. So probably best that he gets a little bit of rest. Tommy Shepard, the Wizards' general manager, said best for him to sit out the upcoming games in Orlando and avoid the risk of further injury. Brad cited a little bit of discomfort in his right rotator cuff as he said he was basically ramping up from 0 to 100 from going from the coronavirus break back into playing basketball. And he did mention that his decision will be left mostly to the team doctors. As Brad said, this is better for the long term of the team, though, as we probably weren't going to compete very well for a spot anyway. Even if we did make the playoffs, I had them getting swept in the first round, of course, most likely having to play the Bucks. But I will say this has me looking forward to seeing either improvement or lack of improvement, I guess, that being the opposite, from our young players, most notably Troy Brown Jr. and Rui Hachimura. Both of those are the team's latest first-round picks, so obviously the team hopes that they play a factor into the long-term plans of the organization as we try to retool. But without Brad, without Davis, in the bubble in Orlando, this is about developing our young talent. So guys like Troy Brown and Rui, as I mentioned, but also guys like Thomas Bryant, see if he can develop into a reliable defender, see if guys like Mo Wagner can improve his defensive positioning, see if Jerome Robinson can just be consistent all around. He's shown splashes. Isak Bonga, see if his ball handling has improved. Lengthy 6'9" guard, really. Hopefully his ball handling has improved. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing Admiral Schofield, our second-round pick in 2019. Rangy guy, undersized for the forward position. But I look forward to seeing him have an opportunity. He showed out in the G League, so he obviously deserves this opportunity, as well as Jerian Grant, who the team signed from its G League. But speaking of some of these players, Thomas Bryant, Gary Payton II, and Garrison Matthews didn't travel with the team to Orlando. It seems that Garrison Matthews' decision is personal, while Thomas Bryant and Gary Payton reportedly tested positive for the coronavirus. We'll see what this means going forward, but obviously missing anybody hurts their playoff chances even more. I mentioned last week that the Nets were probably the Wizards' best chance of knocking off a team and making it into the playoffs, as they are without, of course, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, having DeAndre Jordan and Wilson Chandler opt out, as well as Spencer Dinwiddie joining them earlier this week. The Nets roster still does have Karis LeVert, who is coming into his own, and Jared Allen, who's arguably one of the better defensive centers in the Eastern Conference, but the Nets also have a tougher schedule. That being said, the Nets did make a few roster additions, signing the 40-year-old guard Jamal Crawford, as well as reportedly closing in on forward Michael Beasley. While those do significantly improve their rosters, as I mentioned, Jamal Crawford is 40 and hopefully slowing down just enough, and Michael Beasley is serving a 5-game suspension from the end of the 2019 season. And obviously that would see the Wizards not having to face him in their matchup as they play them in, I believe, the second game of the season. But all in all, this means higher odds for a good lottery pick for the Wiz. And as I've been trying to say, it's about developing for the future. I think they have the pieces beyond this season to do a little bit better rather than getting swept in the first round. But moving on to hockey, the National Hockey League announced the details to phases 3 and 4 of its return to play plan, as well as an extension to their collective bargaining agreement, which will run through 2026. The key dates of their announcement included training camps getting underway on the 13th of July, as well as the 26th of July being the travel date to each team's individual hub city, with the qualification rounds and round robin getting underway on August 1st. The announcement also included Toronto being named the hub city for Eastern Conference teams, as well as Edmonton being named the host city for Western Conference teams, as well as the place for both conference finals and the Stanley Cup finals. Swinging back around to the District of Champions, the Washington Mystics are without Elena Delle Donne and Tina Charles in the WNBA restart so far in Bradenton, Florida, as both players entered the WNBA's medical evaluation protocol. Delle Donne took to Twitter to remind her following that she battles Lyme disease, which leads to a compromised immune system, so she could be at higher risk for COVID-19 during the restart. And as far as Tina Charles, I haven't seen an update on that, but the WNBA veteran was a new acquisition of the team in the off-season. On to Fight Island and UFC 251. As most of you have probably seen already, the welterweight championship fight that was scheduled between Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns now sees Jorge Masvidal replacing Burns after he tested positive for COVID-19. Jorge Masvidal, of course, was the expected contender for the championship, but his contract dispute with UFC saw him being replaced. This is the fight, however, that everybody who's a fan of the sport wanted to see, dating back all the way to January when Usman and Masvidal had the heated exchange at Super Bowl Radio Row. Masvidal did say he didn't get everything he wanted from his negotiations, but he is, quote, very, very close and happy with the deal. My take is I didn't really expect him to receive everything he wanted. He wanted most of the pay-per-view, but with fans not being allowed in the venues, UFC really has no other way of making money off their fights, so I didn't see him getting all the pay-per-view, but I am happy that he is getting closer to satisfaction with his deal. Hopefully the UFC can do something with John Jones. Obviously the light heavyweight champion of the promotion is holding out for his own contract disputes, and you have Conor McGregor, arguably the sport's most likable fighter, I guess you can say. He recently re-retired, citing a lack of interest as well as the financial incentives. But the final hurdle was cleared in UFC 251, with every fighter so far staying clear of the coronavirus and everybody making weight. This was a big topic, especially for the welterweight fight, as Masvidal said back on Saturday, July 4th, that he weighed around 192 pounds. But he was able to get down to the welterweight maximum of 170, and the fight will officially happen. As far as my predictions, it's kind of hard. I'll be straight up. I'm going to go with Kamaru Usman. Power to the people, my brother, the Nigerian Nightmare. I'll have him beating out Gamebred. As far as the other two title fights, I want to say Max Holloway gets his title back from Volkanovski. Obviously, Volkanovski won the first iteration of the match and took Holloway's belt. And then the vacant bantamweight title, I'm all in for Jose Aldo, one of my favorite fighters in the promotion. He's been at it for a while now. But Peter Yan obviously stands a significant chance. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a title fight. And not a title fight, but still interesting nonetheless. Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade Part 2. I'm going to have to go with Rose Thug Namajunas. Moving on to Major League Soccer, MLS announced that FC Dallas and Nashville SC have been withdrawn from the tournament in Orlando. This comes after 10 of FC Dallas's players, as well as one of its coaches, tested positive for the virus, and Nashville had 9 of its players test positive. So this led Major League Soccer to postpone a few of its opening matches, including DC United's first match against Toronto, which was supposed to take place today at 8 p.m., is now moved to Sunday at 9 a.m. on ESPN2. With this being said, there are more schedule changes to come, and you can look for some rearranging / shuffling of the groups and some tweaks to the qualifying factors. But more on that to come. Wrapping up today's episode with some football news. In the NFL, the Players Association released a memo calling for the cut of the remaining 2 preseason games after the league cut the first 2. And in college football, the Ivy League, well, in college sports in general, the Ivy League announced that there will be no fall sports played. And the Big Ten, the conference housing Maryland, announced that its fall schedules will consist of conference games only. This is the first sign that college football and other fall sports are in jeopardy. So my take on that is for the student athletes to just sit out. I mean, I understand you are going to school to play your respective sports, but these institutions are capitalizing off your marketability, your likeness, without you touching a single cent of that legally. At this point, the NCAA is working on making that happen. But sit out and stay safe, man. It's your livelihood and your future. So don't let them take advantage of you even more than they do. Rise up, student athletes. But the final piece of news coming out of the NFL is Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes signing the richest contract in sports history. His 10-year extension worth up to $500 million, that's up to $503 million, sees him overtake Mike Trout of the Los Angeles Angels in baseball as the richest contract in sports history. As a baseball player, Mike Trout's contract is obviously fully guaranteed, and Patrick Mahomes' contract isn't, but that's still impressive. Oh, to be a top-tier athlete earning up to $500 million. But that's everything for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. God bless.